All right, hey guys, we're back, and we are going to be doing part 2 of our interview with Joy and Travis Phillips. And so today we're going to be talking about dating. So a couple of months ago, kind of halfway through our semester, we did a survey with a bunch of students at Awaken and just in general about what are some of the aspects of relationships that they really wanted to hear about. And probably what we got more than anything else was actually just about the early stages of dating. And so let's just start there. How do you decide if someone is kind of worth going on a few dates with? Maybe Travis, you can touch on that a little bit of when you're kind of at that point of like, what am I doing? Right. How do you actually decide that, okay, sure, this person is worth going on some dates with?
Yeah. And I think it's even a unique place of dating within community. So, and which is really important for us because we're as a church, as a college ministry, believing that there's going to be a really tight-knit community. And so there's a lot of friendships, which obviously we talked about last time, like having healthy friendships and out of that place to have the opportunity to go on dates or to get to know people at a little bit more of a deep level. And so it's a little different than just, kind of asking somebody out that you met at a wedding or something like that. It's like, okay, I really got to consider this because they're, when you take a step like that, it could change like friendship dynamics or like, those kinds of things. And so obviously you want to be very prayerful about it. We always talk about before you take that step, though it's obviously not a huge step. It's not like, oh, I feel like I could marry this person or I want to marry this person. It's a small step in some regards, and we can talk about that a little more. And yet at the same time, because it's happening in the context of community, you want to be very purposeful about it. In the way that we generally talk about that beginning is in conversation with your friends, you're the people that hold you accountable, a person that is discipling you, like, hey, I've really been feeling this or thinking this. How do you feel about that? Or do you feel like I'm in a good place to take this step of pursuing this person? So obviously on the guys in there, you're thinking, you're kind of wanting to check in there first. And I would say taking that initial step when it's kind of worth it or like whatever is when there's something that persists. And I often like telling people, hey, if give it some time. Like you're not in a hurry. Like it's obviously you could risk somebody else asking them out or something like that, but in the end you're not in a hurry. And if it's of the Lord, it's going to work out anyway. But just to really take some time to seek the Lord and not kind of make that kind of quick, like, oh, I felt some butterflies because we had this fun time or something like that, and be too impulsive about it, but really seek the Lord on it, even though, again, like I said, it's not, this massively big thing. In fact, I think purposefully, it shouldn't be a massively big thing in one regard. But so I think accountability and then the consistency where it's not like, oh, I just felt this last week and now I'm asking out this week, but maybe you're giving it a few weeks to really seek the Lord, to ask, and because you're dealing with emotions, and we're people, our emotions kind of can go like this. So just like, hey, is this God or was this just me feeling this certain thing? I don't know. So just giving it a little time there. But if it persists and it feels like, man, I feel like this is the God's on this, and I really would like to just take the step of getting to know this person a little more, then I would say after checking in with accountability, that's a great time to take that step forward.
Yeah. So Travis, you talked a little bit about if a guy kind of has the feelings and what do you do next with those? Can you, Joy, touch a little bit on if a girl has feelings, where does she go from there?
Yeah.
What does she do with those?
Yeah, I think there's some similar steps there. One, you're taking it to Jesus and you're saying, what do I do with this? Is this real? Is this butterflies, some kind of random emotion? See if it lasts, see what's going on there. And you're taking it to accountability and to friends and saying, hey, I want to submit this to you. This is happening in my heart. I want to bring you into it. I want you to know about it. And then I think the next step there, and I get excited about what this did in me and can do in girls is it opens up this part of us, like when this romantic interest or this like deep desire begins to be awakened, and even if it's not, it's early, even if it's not like, oh my goodness, I'm falling in love, it's just this early something, it opens ourselves up in a way that is really vulnerable and can feel really risky. And my encouragement is like, take all of that, like every ounce of it. I mean, you could be at like 1%, 2%, I don't know what's happening, but take whatever it is and throw it into your relationship with Jesus. And there is something that happens there. It's like God allows, sometimes he allows our heart to be opened up. He allows us to be interested and attracted, and our eyes being caught by different people. It doesn't mean because every one of those are going to be people that we end up marrying, obviously, but there is something there that God's allowing it, that he might draw us deeper to himself, that he might draw us more inward into him. And so I don't think we ignore those feelings. I think we definitely explore them in our heart before the Lord in his throne room, in a very safe, protected place where we trust him, we love him, we know he has our best in mind. And so I just want to warn us, don't ignore it or stuff it, and also don't run with it as I'm going to throw myself after this guy because I think this is it, but stay grounded in Jesus and throw all those emotions straight into the throne room and let him meet us. It's such a huge part of my personal story. When my heart began to be awakened, and I didn't know what to do with it. And as a woman, I was like, well, I'm not going to necessarily go and ask him out. What do I do with these emotions? And the way God met me and the way I experienced intimacy with him was unlike anything that I experienced up until that point. And so it's not an easy answer or a clear-cut answer, but it is a take it to Jesus, and then he will begin to speak to you about actually what do you do with it. Do you put yourself out there in ways and try to get to know that person more, or do you not? Or he will speak to you and guide you and lead you. But the benefit of all of it is what you're going to get in Jesus from it. Yeah.
And I think it goes along, or another way to say it, as we talked about in the first episode about guarding our hearts. So obviously you're thinking about that. That's kind of what Joy is saying. You're taking your heart to Jesus, because anytime you start feeling these things, guys or girls, guys, you're kind of asking and you're putting yourself out there. Girls are like, they're feeling these feelings but aren't necessarily going to ask, so they're like, okay, what do I do with it? And so it's there's emotions, there's identity, there's security, there's self-worth. All these things are coming up that maybe you hadn't really paid that much attention to, or it's just coming up in a new way. And anytime you have things like that coming up, it is absolutely an opportunity to go to deeper heart places with Jesus. That's not to say it to make it overly spiritual, but anytime things like that come up, as we learn to take it to Jesus, and it can be a sweet place of intimacy, and yet in the real world aspect of it, I think, like Joy said, obviously I think there are ways that girls can put out the right vibes, or put out, or something. Guys are terrible at reading those often. I think that's a place where guys can grow, because we're talking about even in the last episode about friendships and getting together in groups. It's so foundational for a healthy dating culture is that there's healthy friendships, and we know what those are, so that the dating scene, so to speak, can start at just a notch above that, where if you're already having deep heart to hearts and this and that, it's like, well, then what is the first steps of dating? Because we kind of already did that on the side, or we stayed late after Awaken, or we did, and where we would say that's those one-on-ones where you're learning not the deep heart-to-heart, but the beginning of dating is more like learning a little more about their family, or the 5-minute version of your testimony, not necessarily the I'm weeping version of your testimony on the first, but you're hearing a little more like, what are the dreams of your heart, like well, I think I'd love to be, so you're starting some of those kind of connects. But if you've already done all that, then what we would say is like that you're already kind of you've kind of already initiated this first stage of dating. And what that does in creating a healthy dating culture is that it sets a lower bar for what the expectations are in having like a first date. And because one thing that we felt in just observing different church cultures, being a part of different church cultures, is that sometimes the dating scene is not as healthy, and often that's on the non-existent, like it's not very existent, or there's not a lot of that happening. And then of course it can go over the top the other way. But one of the things that we feel like is a healthy rhythm for a dating culture in a tight-knit, Jesus-centered kind of church community is one that you've established what healthy friendships are, and then out of the context of getting to know one another in groups, you have the opportunity to after going through the process as a man or a woman, with accountability, with checking your own heart, for a guy to say, hey, I'd like to invite you out for coffee. And it's like, because I've really enjoyed getting to hang out in groups, or get to know you a little bit in life group, or this or that. And I'd love to just find out a little more about you. And I think a coffee date is a little bit of a low bar commitment. It's just like an hour long. It's during the day, and so it's not like you're asking for a whole evening and it's got this romantic vibe to it. It literally is this, hey, I'd like to get to know a little more about you. And one of the reasons we value that kind of initial stage of dating is because the hope is that it makes it a little easier for the girl to say yes. Obviously, sometimes the girl may be asked out by a guy who she's really excited that he asked. There also is going to be times where she gets asked out by a guy that she was like, oh, that was kind of left field for me. I hadn't considered that. But our hope is that because the expectations are clear on both sides, like, hey, I just like to go get coffee, that it would make it a lot easier for the girl to say sure. Like, even if she, doesn't necessarily see it leading anywhere serious or going way down the road, that there would be a chance like, hey, sure, I'd love to get to know you, get to know you a little bit and have coffee. And, even kind of knowing that the guy put himself out there. Now, by no means does a girl ever have to feel like, oh, I've got to say yes. Like, if that's what Travis and Joy said, I got to say yes. You don't have to say yes. Obviously, that's your prerogative. But I would like to say that when you do say yes, you're only saying yes to coffee. That's the hope. Like, yeah. I'm not saying yes, oh, I like you. Yes, I see this going places. Yes, I hope you hold my hand. You're just saying like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, you're a nice guy. Like, I'll go to coffee with you, and then all along the way you have, and then for the guy, they know that also. So if they're really liking this girl, they know that, hey, she's only saying yes to coffee one time and to get to know me a little bit. She's not saying that she likes me or she's been dreaming about me. So you got to keep your heart and mind in check. But hopefully that establishes a culture where you can go on a coffee date or two or even three, and then and at any point along the way, just to be able, that the girl has the prerogative, or the guy, to say like, hey, it's really been great getting to know you at this level. Like, I think we should just still be friends or whatever. And of course, in any of that, somebody can get a little hurt, but because you've put yourself out there. Maybe it's mutual sometimes, but maybe other times somebody wants to keep going and the person doesn't, and that's going to cause a little hurt and pain. But if we've guarded our hearts, if we've been clear on the communication side of things, then hopefully it makes just some of those initial steps into dating a lower bar, and not a lower bar in a negative way, but in some ways, yeah, so that there can be like a healthy dating culture where a guy doesn't feel like he has to be a perfect 10 to ever ask somebody out. But again, I would say to the guys, like, get together groups, learn how to pick up on clues, like, you know, in terms of like who you would be asking out, or like, you know, you want the girl to know your name, you know, before you ask her out. I mean, it'd be preferable if, you know, she knew something about, or like, wait, yeah, who are you again? You don't want the like, oh yeah, remind me of your name kind of thing. You don't want anything close to that. So just, so yeah, just try to pick up on clues at, you know, whatever. And you know, you can swing for the fences too. There's nothing wrong with that. I did. So
Yeah. I love that you just touched on like how low pressure it should be in a lot of ways. And, you know, obviously this is something that college students are very much in the middle of a lot of times, and there's probably 1,000 different questions that we could ask, and we could spend forever on this like one topic. But can you just touch on a little bit of like what are some of those qualities that you actually do want to look for in someone, especially just when you are dating within a church community and as a follower of Jesus? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. One thing that we always say, and you don't necessarily know that before you ask someone out on a first date, but big picture, one thing that we always are saying is you're looking for someone that is humble and teachable and willing to change. So you're not going to necessarily know that in hanging out in groups and whatever, but you might, depending on how close knit your group is or whatever. But those are things that you're looking for. You can get through and over a lot of things if humility is the lead piece for someone. If you know that they are broken and humble before Jesus, then you can go through a lot of hard things in a marriage and make it because they are willing to fall at the feet of Jesus and in repentance. And so so that's something that you're looking for. But also then you're wanting to see in yourself. You're self-evaluating. Am I even that? Am I even someone that's humble and teachable and willing to change? So there's that piece too in this whole thing. And then I think backing it up a little bit to when you first are beginning to kind of be interested in someone and noticing someone, you're just aware of their presence in a room and how they interact with other people and how they respond to God. So maybe that's a little bit of a less a easier way to say it than those other big things. But do they respond to God? Is this someone that I'm seeing that they actually respond to God? Not just that they come to Awaken or they attend a life group or they all these other, they go to church, or they go to this Bible study. But you actually are seeing them respond to God. You're watching them. You're able to see their relationship with God. You're able to see fruit in their life. That those are things that you're looking for, and those are things that you want. Those are things that I would say you absolutely want to have in a serious relationship and in a spouse. And it takes time sometimes to see those things, but just because you're attracted to them and they go to your church or they came to life group twice in a row, they must love Jesus, but you're actually looking for is there fruit in their life? Are they running after God? Are they passionate about Jesus? Those are the things that I think you're really looking for. And you could see that in someone that's a buddy and a friend, so you don't have to necessarily have to have walked with this person forever and ever to know, but that you're just on the onset, you're kind of picking up these clues of what does their life in God actually look like?
And with that, I would say a kind of a seasoned history, or that there has been an established walk with God. Now I know we're talking about the younger people, and it doesn't mean that they had to be saved when they were 7 or something like that, but where there's something clear about the foundations that have been laid, and there has been a period of time where that has been walked out, where they have served, and they have been faithful to serve, or they have really gone to the deeper places, in terms of some kind of healing ministry or prayer ministry, freedom. Have you gone there with God where You've kind of dug into there's where they have spent time in discipleship and accountability, where they have allowed people to speak into their life, and where maybe they have identified, man, there's places from my childhood or from things that were done to me that have just become like this baggage, and they're going there with those things, and they're getting healing, and they're moving forward, and not getting completely wowed by charisma, or they're the life of the party, and man, they stand up and share the gospel in front of everybody boldly, which those are great things, but not getting wowed by some of the things that are maybe more personality or gifting or this or that, because first we're looking at character and the longevity of character, and like Joy said, humble, teachable, and willing to change. Like, okay, because they're going low. They're committed to community, like to accountability, but also to just community in the church. Like, hey, I value living in community, not getting isolated, and so there's all those types of things that are key. And like Joy said, you don't have to, again, back to the low bar thing, you don't have to know all of that before like the girl says yes. You don't have to have all that figured out, but that's the things that you're beginning to look for. And then beyond that, there's the very natural things of like, is there chemistry here? Like, is there chemistry? Is there friendship? Like, do we have fun together? Is there like, we really enjoy one another? And then I would also say, as things progress, how do we, Joy mentioned it in groups, when you're evaluating them in a group setting, like, and how people are drawn to them. And there was certainly some of that for us. Like, I loved how like younger women were attracted to being around her and wanting to be discipled by her. I was like, that's awesome, like what they're seeing. So I love that. But then there was also kind of evaluating, once we were kind of dating and going to, this event or this place together in groups, like how we kind of interacted as a group, like as kind of a dating couple, or so that kind of continued as well. So those are some of the things. I mean, obviously the list can go on and on, but some of the maybe fundamental things.
Well, I want to throw this out there, and I know we're talking about specifically what are you looking for, but I want to throw this idea out there, and that is that while we fully believe that God has a companion for us and a partner in life for us, that there's, I want to encourage us, especially in this stage, that we're actually, the number one goal is not looking. A scripture that I have held on to for years and years of my life, but it started in college, was Proverbs 4:25-27, that says, let your eyes be fixed directly before you. And then it goes on to say, don't look to the right or to the left. And so really you're just running after Jesus, and you're going after the things that you feel stirred by, that he's called you to. And there's people that are running with you, and you're gonna find that person, not as you're looking to the right or to the left, but just you're gonna find yourself as Travis said, as you're on mission together, you're going to find them. You're going to end up, again, we talked about calling as a single and all these different things, that you're going to find them as you are running after Jesus in Absolutely. Your calling. Yeah. That's where you're going to end up finding them. You're not going to necessarily find them. That's where I could speak to these different ways of, whether it's different ways to find to get a date or whatever, that I think it works most beautifully when so many questions have already been answered for you. Actually, if you find each other just literally side by side. Actually, a picture God gave me as Travis and I started dating was, I was like, I am going to do that. I'm going to fix my eyes on Jesus. I'm not going to look to the right or the left. And I had a fear, like I might miss it. I had friends getting married, friends getting engaged, friends dating people. And I was like, this is the time. Like, this is the time you look around. This is not the time you like focus in, I could miss it. And I just felt like Jesus said, you just fix your eyes on me. I will literally throw them in front of your path when it's time. And
came running by.
Yeah, I don't know about
getting a lead.
I'm not quite sure you passed me. Just kidding. But really, that's what happened. Is I was like, what? Something's in my way. Like, what is in my way? And I kept trying to actually get him out of my way along the way, but it was really what God had purposed for us. And so you're not going to miss God when you are running hard after Jesus and running after the things he's called you to. It's in that place that you're going to actually just stumble across the person that God would have for you. So
Yeah, and I think that's such a real fear that probably so many college students have is, am I going to miss it? Like, am I going to miss it if I say yes to Jesus in this thing or in this thing? So I think that speaks to what is in the heart of a lot of people.
Yeah,
That's
and
so
he's
good.
He is a good father.
Yeah.
He's not gonna let that happen.
yeah, and well, we're gonna let you ask the next question, but I'm gonna say this: that as you may not know it on the first date, or you may not know it on the second date or the third date, but I want to challenge you college students, like, as you begin to get farther and farther along along with the person that you're dating, that person will blow you away. That they're not going to be perfect, and they may not check off every box that you made when you were 15 or whatever, but their relationship with God, how they run after Jesus and how they lead you down that same path, will absolutely blow you away. We fully believe that God does above and beyond what we could think or imagine, that he gives us abundance. He gives us more than we could ever ask for. And so I believe that's absolutely the case in a relationship. And so not settling or compromising or making adjustments, but holding on to these things that you humble, teachable, willing to change, running after Jesus, all these things, like, and then some, I think is what God has for us.
That's so good. Can we touch on a little bit of the practicals of, like, assuming you make it past those initial stages and, you know, you're past, like, the initial dates a little bit and you're more of in an actual relationship, what are some of the healthy, and you don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but what are some of the healthy emotional and physical boundaries that you have in that space?
Yeah.
I think that as things progress, one of the things that will let you know what appropriate emotional and physical boundaries are is what has been communicated. So we kind of talked about, like, coffee is just communication is, hey, I'd like to just get to know you a little better. Before you move to the next phase, there needs to be kind of this place of clear communication of intentions, and as the guy brings that forward, and we keep saying the guy because biblically, I would say that it's a guy's role to lead in that way, to initiate in that way. And I would say to, you know, any woman watching, like, you want a guy who's gonna take the lead and not be passive and not sit back, you know, into marriage and raising a family. You want a guy who will take initiative and, like, hey, I want to move forward in God. I want to move our family forward. I want to take initiative in life. And so that's kind of a side note, but
it's also pursuit. It's not, they're initiating a pursuit of
mm-hmm.
you. And so that's what you want one that will pursue your heart.
And so it's real important for a guy to, to be able to communicate his intentions, and if and when those intentions change, it needs to be communicated. So there should never be, like, the asking out on a coffee date and then the girl not hearing from the guy again because he's not interested. That needs to be communicated. Like, hey, thanks so much for taking the time. Like, I really enjoyed it. Let's be friends, whatever. So it also needs to be communicated, like, hey, I'd like to take the next step. Like, I really enjoy getting to know you. And maybe that's from going on a coffee date here or there to, like, hey, I'd like to kind of start dating, or to, you know, I don't know the language or the words for it all, but just like the next step of, like, hey, let's go out to dinner and have an evening where, you know, there's kind of a switch, and, like, hey, I'd like to get a little more serious in dating rather than just going on coffee dates, like take you out for an evening or go on an all morning hike and have brunch at the top, or I don't know, those kind of things where you're going a little the next step, like, hey, I'm interested in taking it to the next level, really enjoy getting to know you. I'd like to continue doing that by, taking on more dates or whatever. And that needs to be communicated so that then the girl has the opportunity, like, oh, okay, I was okay with coffee phase. I don't know if I'm okay with hike a mountain all day phase, or whatever. So there's just that clear communication. And so that kind of continues on, like, okay, so now we just kind of went on some dates to now we're dating, or we're kind of consistently going on dates, to eventually there's some kind of communication about boyfriend, girlfriend, like where you're kind of more exclusive. And so that's another kind of step in. There needs to be intentional communication, like, hey, I'd like for you to be my girlfriend, like, you're telling them why. And so again, the girl's like, hey, yes or no, basically, right? So then at every stage of that, you're kind of taking the emotional intimacy to the next level. And so that grows, and it's not only emotional intimacy, it's the time, the amount of time that you spend with one another. It's spiritual intimacy, the depth that you're talking about, spiritual things. All those things are increasing as the communication of what we are increases. So that, just like when we talked about in the singleness, like, you're not having these late night conversations as friends, that they're getting very emotional and stuff. It's like, oh, wait, this is not what I do with my friends, so it's kind of the same thing. This is not what you do in coffee face. Like, we don't, but it goes on, this natural progression. Okay, now we open up a little more, or boyfriend, girlfriend, now you are sharing the weepy version of your testimony, and like, and you're, maybe you're starting to pray together, and maybe on dates you've kind of prayed for the meal and this or that, but you're not necessarily praying for one another, because that's spiritual intimacy, but it's still intimacy. And so, like, when you pray for somebody, that's intimacy. That's a little further down the road. You're not on a coffee date and I'm starting to pray for, like, I just prayed over her that you would heal her heart, bless her, and like, I don't know, that's just not what you're doing. So obviously we're not talking about all the specifics, but it increases over time, and you need to do that in line with what's been communicated in terms of the intentionality of the relationship. So, but even in any of those dating stages, again, you're not staying out or up really late and having emotional conversations. That just, anytime you bring in the late night aspect to it, it does something, and maybe we say things we wish we wouldn't have said. You certainly don't do it on the physical boundary side of things, because you get yourself in situations that you shouldn't be in. That's another one of the gauges, is the physical intimacy, which obviously just starts with things like holding hands or putting your arm around somebody, or giving a hug or whatever, those kind of things. And so the all of the gauges kind of progress all the way until marriage, except for the physical intimacy one, where that has a place where it just stops, and you're putting hard boundaries in place. And if there's anything we've learned about relationships here, even in the last 10 years or so that we've been in Arizona, actually 9 years, but is that you can never be too careful, or you can never assume, like, oh, well, we have this relationship with God, or you can never assume that you've got that part under control. And so you've got to put boundaries where, like, hey, we're not going to be out together alone past a certain time. We're not going to be alone together in X, Y, or Z, or if we're not going to be in an apartment unless somebody else is there. Those kinds of things. You're having to put safeguards, even if you feel like you're okay. You're having safeguards. You've got open lines of communications with others. You've even talked about some of those boundaries as boyfriend, girlfriend, on what we're not going to do, and then we're not getting as close to those boundary lines as we can. We're running the opposite way of those things. But so obviously, again, we're not getting real detailed in what exactly those are.
But I do want to jump in a little bit with the physical. I think one thing is with the physical boundaries and why they're so important is that dating is a really beautiful thing. It's really fun. There's the pressures of life kind of are on hold for a little bit, and even in the moment, like, you get engaged, something shifts, like the pressure is on and everything is more serious and more intense. There's something about dating that can be really beautiful. But I think what hijacks that is when the physical takes over, and when sin takes over and the lust of the flesh takes over. It hijacks this, like, beautiful thing that God has designed for us to be able to just really discover one another on the emotional side, on the spiritual side, and on the all the past and the future, and all these great, amazing, fun conversations that you can have. But it's hijacked by the physical because it's insatiable, and there is no end to that. And so you have this date that is set aside, or an evening set aside, that could be filled with dreams and all these things to discover about one another, and yet there's this insatiable desire to get more physically. And so then it ends up, and we've seen relationships totally train wrecked, and actually ending as a result of that, and for sure, if not ending, for sure just derailed. And so I just wanted to throw that in there.
Because part of that too is what it brings is condemnation and guilt and shame, and then the relationship becomes centered around the physical and what. Okay, we got to be careful. We can't do this, and we're guilty again. Oh, we're doing that, instead of like exploring all the beautiful parts of it, and in allowing. I mean, it's what God does, and it's what His Word is all about. Is about setting us up for the most amount of joy, for the most amount of peace, for the most amount of satisfaction. And sometimes in this physical realm, we have this idea that He's stealing that or withholding it, but it's not. It's like, no, there's beauty in it. And in the end, the motivation is first and foremost that we want to honor God. It's what He said, to be holy as I am holy. And so when we're talking about it, we're not only talking about reserving sexual intercourse for marriage, but we're talking about purity. Like, we're not talking about getting as close to that line as we can, but we believe that the biblical mandate is that we're running towards purity, not running towards the line of sin. And so so that's the way we're wanting to head. And so that's purity in thought, that's purity in our actions, and trusting that God has the best for us. And if that person is the one that you're going to marry, then you're going to have a lifelong pursuit of enjoying that type of physical intimacy. And if they're not, you don't want to give away to that person something that you want to reserve to be able to give to the one that God has chosen for you to marry. And so a lot of motivation there. Obviously, it's the real world battle, but totally worth it to run after God. He has our best in mind. So.
Yeah, I love that you said at one point, like, don't assume you can trust yourself with that. But I think what both of you really are getting at is that you can trust God. Like, at the end of the day, what He says is going to be far more trustworthy than our own hearts and thoughts. So that's so good. We're going to wrap this one up. So thank you guys so much for sharing just all your wisdom in the realm of dating. Tomorrow the next episode, we're going to be talking about marriage and what that looks like. So stay tuned.
Good.